Welcome to the Twin Labs podcast, where we help you make better decisions using AI and digital twins. Today, we are plunging into a topic that's, well, it's not just theoretical anymore, is it? It's deeply practical and, frankly, increasingly vital. We're talking about how AI makes decisions, especially when those decisions happen in places where the stakes couldn't possibly be higher. Think safety-critical settings. Imagine AI taking the wheel, so to speak, in environments where just one wrong move could have, well, catastrophic consequences. We've been exploring some really insightful source material for this deep dive. It comes from a researcher at the Alan Turing Institute involved in this remarkable collaborative effort called Project Bluebird. And this project is focused entirely on peeling back the layers of what it would actually mean for AI to handle autonomy in air traffic control, which, as you can imagine, is a domain that's inherently complex, demands split-second accuracy, and is built on just layers upon layers of safety protocols. The decisions made in ATC literally guide thousands of aircraft every day, carrying millions of passengers.
That's right. And our mission today is to really unpack this source material, understand its significance, and explore the framework it proposes. We want to start at the beginning, understanding the fundamental nature of AI decision-making itself. Then we'll confront the significant challenges that pop up when you even think about putting these systems into high-risk environments like air traffic control. The source material isn't just theory, it actually proposes a concrete framework for how we might validate whether an AI system is safe enough for ATC. And this comes directly from the insights gained through Project Bluebird. It's all about wrestling with that question of trust. How do we build it? How do we measure it? And crucially, how do we prove it when lives are on the line?
Okay, so let's unpack this. Maybe start with the decision maker we all know best, ourselves, humans. I mean, decisions are just the constant drumbeat of our existence, right?
Yeah.
The source material kicks off with this honestly mind-boggling statistic. On average, a human makes roughly 30,000 decisions. Every single
30,000. Yeah.
30,000. And that's not just the big agonizing choices. That includes all the micro decisions, hitting snooze, again, subconsciously navigating around someone on the pavement, deciding exactly how much milk goes in your teeth, picking a route through a busy supermarket. It's everything from like the autopilot functions of our brains to those moments where we consciously weigh things up, like, choosing breakfast or scrolling endlessly trying to pick a film to watch. Decisions are just fundamental to being human.
Absolutely. And as phenomenal as the human brain is, I mean, capable of intuition, creativity, nuanced judgment, it also has significant limitations, especially for certain kinds of decisions. And that's precisely why we even entertain the idea of bringing AI into the picture. Humans, well, we have finite processing power. We can only juggle so much information at once.
Right.
We can be inconsistent, tired one day, distracted the next, feeling differently about the exact same input. We carry biases, often hidden deep down, that can lead to unfair or, frankly, suboptimal judgments. We can be slow to react, especially when there's just an overwhelming amount of data or we're under immense pressure. And let's not forget, training human experts to make really complex decisions in specialized fields, that's incredibly resource-intensive, expensive. The source material actually gives an example, costs potentially 200,000 pounds a year just to train one expert to that level.
Wow.
So AI, at least theoretically, offers a way to overcome some of these very human limits. It brings speed, consistency, potentially lacks certain types of bias, and can handle vast amounts of data simultaneously.
And this isn't some far-off future thing, is it? AI is already making decisions that directly impact our lives right now. Think about the targeted ads you see scrolling through social media. There's an AI constantly analyzing your data, your clicks, your demographics, deciding which specific ad is most likely to grab your attention.
Every day.
Or when you plug a destination into Google Maps, an AI is crunching real-time traffic, road closures, typical speeds, deciding the optimal route for you out of, well, millions of possibilities. The source even mentions a really cool example in medicine, suggesting AI is helping doctors, perhaps with diagnostics, analyzing scans, or spotting patterns in patient data to help decide on treatments.
Yeah, it's already filtering into so many areas.
But here's where the comfort level, and maybe the central challenge of this deep dive, really comes in. The source material asks this question directly to you, the listener, and it's a crucial one. How far are you willing to take this? The speaker and the source walks through this sort of progression of examples, showing how our trust, or maybe our lack of it, changes dramatically as the risk associated with the AI's decision goes up. Like, would you be comfortable letting an AI choose your socks in the morning?
Probably okay with that one. Low stakes.
Exactly. Stakes are zero. What about an AI that drafts and maybe even sends some of your work emails without you checking them first? Maybe scheduling meetings, confirming details.
That's a step up. Requires a bit more faith.
Definitely. And then the big one, the scenario that pushes a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
Would you be happy getting into the back of an autonomous taxi, knowing an AI is making every single steering, braking, acceleration decision, navigating through potentially chaotic city streets?
That's the crunch point for many, isn't it?
It is, and the source rightly notes there's this huge spectrum of comfort levels depending on the scenario.
Yeah.
Understanding why that spectrum exists is key to figuring out how we approach AI in these really safety-critical areas.
Right. And at its core, if you strip it right down, a decision, whether it's human or AI, is fundamentally just a mapping. You have inputs and you get outputs. For us, the inputs are everything we sense. What we see crossing the street, the sound of a car, the feel of the pavement. Our brain then does this processing. The source playfully calls it something funky that we don't really understand. And the output is our decision. Step back, walk faster, wait. Automating this with AI, it basically involves two main steps. First, you've got to translate those real-world inputs into something a computer understands, data streams from sensors, numbers, digital signals.
Okay.
Second, you need to replace that mysterious human something funky with a computational process, an algorithm, a model, a neural network, whatever it is. Something designed to take those digital inputs and reliably generate a desired output, a decision. And understanding how that algorithmic process actually works is the next crucial step in this whole discussion. When we look at how AI systems are designed to make these decisions, the source material really highlights that there are two fundamentally different approaches, kind of representing opposite ends of a spectrum in how they're built and how they operate.
Okay, so what's on one end of that spectrum? Well, you have what are known as rules-based systems. This is maybe the most straightforward way to think about automating expert decisions. The source uses this really clear analogy. Imagine you're a business owner, you've got this incredibly valuable expert on your team, maybe someone earning that 200,000 pound a year figure, making all the critical calls for a specific part of your operation.
Right.
You look at that cost and think, okay, that's steep. Can I somehow bottle that expertise? So you might literally sit down with that expert, maybe metaphorically lock them in a room for a day, as the source jokes, and just extract every single piece of their decision logic. When this happens, what do? If you see X and Y, does that mean Z? You end up building this absolutely huge table of rules, basically a giant flowchart, an enormous if this then that list, trying to capture all that expert knowledge.
A massive instruction manual, essentially.
Exactly. And the big advantages of this rules-based way of doing things, according to the source, are transparency and predictability. There's zero ambiguity, right? The answer for any given situation is hard-coded in the rules. The results are predictable because the logic is deterministic, same input, same output every time. And crucially, the decision maker is entirely understandable. You or your expert wrote the rules, so you know exactly why a decision was made. You can point to the specific rule that fired.
That traceability is definitely a plus.
But, and the source is quick to point this out, there are significant downsides. This approach is inherently simplistic when you try to apply it to complex dynamic environments. It's incredibly rigid, not flexible at all, and a major Achilles heel. What happens when a situation crops up that you didn't anticipate? Something that wasn't covered by the rules you spent ages writing down.
Yeah, the unknown unknowns.
Exactly.
Yeah.
As the source bluntly puts it, in that scenario, you're screwed. The system just has no programmed response. It hits a wall.
Right. So, moving to the other extreme of that spectrum, we find reinforcement learning, or RL. This approach, as the source notes, is inspired more by how humans and animals learn basically through interacting with their environment. Trial and error, guided by feedback.
Okay, so less about writing rules, more about letting it learn.
Precisely. You design an AI agent, set it loose, maybe in a simulation, and it makes decisions, takes actions. Then it gets feedback, rewards, or penalties. A positive score if the action was good towards its goal, a negative one if it was bad. The AI's objective is to learn a strategy, a policy, that maximizes its total reward over time. And it does this through just vast amounts of repetition, learning by doing millions and trillions and billions of times, as the source puts it.
Wow, that's a lot of learning.
It's immense, and the power of RL is huge. It can tackle and potentially solve very complex problems. The source mentions cancer research as an example, which suggests its use in analyzing complex biological data or maybe optimizing treatment plans. It can also discover very surprising solution strategies that might seem counterintuitive to us or beyond what human experts would normally consider, because it explores the problem space in ways that aren't limited by our human cognitive biases or traditional methods.
Okay, that sounds incredibly powerful, but what are the catches? especially for safety-critical stuff?
Well, there are substantial drawbacks, particularly for these high-stakes applications. Firstly, designing that reward system, it's fiendishly difficult. The source gives a simple but really effective example, a self-driving car. Is just rewarding it with +1 if it doesn't crash enough for it to learn to drive safely, courteously, legally in all weather conditions?
Probably not. Seems a bit basic.
Absolutely not. Defining a reward function that truly captures all the nuances of a complex real-world goal like safe driving is a major, major research challenge in itself. Secondly, and this is perhaps the biggest hurdle for safety-critical settings, is the black box problem. With complex RL agents, especially those using deep neural networks, it's often very hard to interpret what a reinforcement learning agent is doing and why it made those decisions.
So you can see what it did, but not why.
Exactly. The model learns these incredibly intricate patterns and internal representations that map inputs to outputs, but they often don't translate neatly into human understandable rules or logic. You see the decision, but tracing the exact computational steps and learned connections that led to it. It's incredibly opaque, even for the engineers who built the thing. You lose that clear line of reasoning, and this difficulty, this challenge in understanding why a complex AI makes a certain decision, brings us directly to this fundamental tension highlighted in the source material. It's the trade-off between interpretability and complexity.
Like a seesaw, you said.
Exactly like a seesaw. And you rarely get both sides perfectly balanced at the top. On one side, like we just discussed, you've got your rules-based systems. They are maximally interpretable. You can literally read the rule, understand the logic, trace the path. That transparency is gold when you need to audit a decision or figure out why something failed. But they sit right at the low end of the complexity scale. They can only handle situations explicitly covered by those predefined rules. Anything new or nuanced, the system breaks.
Okay, and the other side.
That's where reinforcement learning often sits. These systems can be maximally complex. They can learn incredibly sophisticated strategies for dynamic, high-dimensional problems, find novel solutions rules could never cover. But in achieving that high level of complexity, you typically sacrifice interpretability. You lose the ability to easily peer inside that black box and understand, in human terms, the intricate internal workings, the learned logic that resulted in that specific decision. You can't easily get into the nitty-gritty of why it chose that particular action at that particular moment.
Right. And this trade-off, this tension between what an AI can do and whether we can understand why it did it, that becomes absolutely critical when you're talking about safety-critical settings, doesn't it? I mean, if an AI running a hospital system or a self-driving car or an air traffic control system makes a decision that leads to a near miss or an accident or a loss of separation, and you have absolutely no reliable way to figure out why it made that decision.
How can you trust it again?
Exactly. How can you possibly trust it? How do you learn from the failure? How do you assure the public or the regulators that it won't happen again? The source implies pretty strongly, I think, that this lack of interpretability in complex models is a major barrier to their widespread use in places where safety is paramount and accountability is essential.
Absolutely. And so the dream, really, for these high-stakes applications is to find something in the middle, a balance point on that seesaw. The source calls this ideal a gray box model, not completely transparent like simple rules, not completely opaque like a complex black box.
Sort of the best of both worlds.
That's the hope. They're often hybrid systems that try to combine some level of interpretability, maybe by incorporating human knowledge or constraints into the design, with the power and flexibility needed to handle complex situations. Finding that sweet spot is the central challenge for researchers applying AI, where both performance and understanding are non-negotiable. And this is precisely the challenge that Project Bluebird, the specific focus of our source material today, is tackling head-on. In a very demanding, safety-critical environment, air traffic control.
Right.
It's a domain where you absolutely need robust, understandable systems, and it's also where using powerful simulation environments like the kind Twin Labs develops becomes absolutely essential for development and for validation.
Okay, so let's zoom in on that domain then. Air traffic control, ATC. The source mentions NATS as the UK's provider, and they're a key partner in Project Bluebird. And just to grasp the scale, you mentioned the complexity. The source says UK airspace alone handles over 13,000 flights.
Yeah.
Every single day.
It's an immense, constantly shifting puzzle in 3 dimensions.
So the job of an air traffic controller, whether they're in a tower guiding planes on the ground or during takeoff and landing, or working in a big control center managing high-altitude traffic across huge sectors of sky, their job is basically to safely and efficiently guide planes through their patch.
Keep everything flowing smoothly and safely.
Right. Primary goal. Make sure every plane entering their sector leaves it without conflict, following the right route, the right altitude, and doing it in an orderly, timely way. Now, the source material has this great way to help us understand just how surprisingly complex this can be, even in what looks like a simple situation. They ask you to imagine you are the controller.
Okay, put myself in the hot seat.
Exactly. Picture your sector, your bit of sky, as a black box on your screen. Now imagine two planes entering. An EasyJet on the left, a Ryanair on the right, both flying towards the middle, and they plan to follow these simple, straight dashed lines shown on your screen.
Okay, got the picture. Two planes, converging paths.
Right. Looking just at their paths, your first thought might be, okay, yeah, they'll cross, but it looks like they'll pass each other with plenty of room. No problem.
Seems reasonable enough.
But if that's your thought process, the source reveals you would have just failed your air traffic control exam.
Okay, why? What did I miss?
Because safety in ATC is defined way, way more stringently than just avoiding a crash.
That's absolutely right. The people working in ATC are incredibly safety-focused, and their definition of safety, it's built on multiple layers of protection. It is fundamentally not enough just to ensure the physical planes won't collide. ATC demands maintaining separation within a substantial buffer region around each aircraft at all times.
Buffer region, like a safety zone.
Exactly. Often visualized as bubbles or protective zones. They're there to account for all the uncertainties in flying. You can't always know a plane's precise position down to the inch. Pilot reaction times vary. Unexpected weather can pop up. Radar has limits.
Right, the real world isn't perfect.
Precisely. So these bubbles represent the zone that absolutely must stay clear around each plane. The golden rule, the non-negotiable requirement is, these bubbles must never touch. If at any point the projected safety buffers around two aircraft overlap, even if the planes themselves are still, miles apart physically, you've committed a loss of separation. And that is a safety failure in air traffic control.
Okay, wow. So let's replay that scenario in our heads. EasyJet, Ryanair, converging. But this time, picture those vital safety bubbles around them. As they follow their initial straight paths towards the center, you immediately see
the bubbles are going to overlap.
Exactly. A loss of separation is imminent, so just letting them fly past isn't an option. You have to take action, and quickly, to keep those bubbles apart.
Action is required. You can't just watch it happen.
Okay, so recognizing action is needed. What would a human controller typically do there? The source gives a classic example instruction. You might tell the EasyJet pilot, EasyJet, turn left heading 270, and the Ryanair, turn left heading 090, maybe planning to vector them around each other, then loop them back onto their original paths once they're clear.
Standard vectoring, yeah. Create some space.
Right. So if you visualize this new plan, the plane's turning away, maybe making little loops on your screen, it looks safe now, the immediate bubbles won't touch.
Yeah.
Problem solved.
But?
As the source material reveals, working on something as safety critical as ATC, you quickly learn there's always another caveat. Just when you think you've got it, there's another layer. And with that simple turn left instruction plan, you would in fact fail again.
Precisely. And this failure point really highlights this critical concept of redundancy and robustness in ATC safety. It's a principle learned the hard way over decades. It's not enough to have a plan that would work if everything goes absolutely perfectly. The plan itself has to have layers of safety baked in. Rolling back to the moment you give those turn left instructions, the source narrator asks a very pointed question. Would you feel comfortable being a passenger on one of those planes, knowing that was the controller's only plan to fix the problem?
Probably not, now that you put it that way.
And the answer, if you understand the system, is a firm no. Why? Because the critical question in ATC is always, what if something goes wrong after you've made the plan and given the instruction, but before the planes are actually safely separated?
Like what? What could go wrong?
Well, what if there's a radio failure? One pilot doesn't get the instruction. What if they mishear it? What if, for some reason, the pilot doesn't execute the turn as expected? Maybe an onboard issue, maybe a misunderstanding.
Okay, lots of possibilities.
Exactly.
Right.
And if your original plan relied entirely on that perfect instruction being received and followed perfectly to solve the conflict, then any failure in that communication or execution chain could still lead directly back to a loss of separation, the bubbles touching, because your planned fix never fully happened.
So the plan itself has to be fail-safe, in a way.
It needs to be safely redundant. If the primary method of fixing it, like the radio call, fails, the situation must still remain safe. Or there must be immediate, reliable backup procedures or maybe inherent separation already built into the overall traffic flow. This layered approach, constantly thinking about potential failures, building in safeguards, accounting for uncertainty in communication execution, whether that's why air traffic control is one of the most cognitively demanding jobs out there.
And consequently,
And consequently, why automating it to the required safety standard is, as the source says, a very hard problem.
okay. And addressing that very hard problem is the core focus of Project Bluebird. Now, while the big ambition is obviously exploring if automation could work in ATC, the source clarifies that the immediate practical goal isn't necessarily about rolling out a fully autonomous AI controller next year.
That's right. The real foundational goal of Project Bluebird right now is to deliver a framework for how to validate AI systems in air traffic control. Think about it like this. Imagine you're at NATS, the UK's ATC provider, a partner on this project. Some cutting-edge AI company, maybe from, I don't know, somewhere like France, comes knocking. They say, hey, we've built this AI, can manage air traffic perfectly, better than humans, safer, more efficient. Implement this, save billions on controllers.
And the sales pitch.
Exactly. If you're NATS, how do you even begin to evaluate that claim? How do you get the evidence, the absolute proof that this AI is safe enough to trust with millions of lives every day? We have processes for certifying human controllers for traditional software, but there's currently no blueprint, no regulatory framework, no agreed standard for validating a complex learning AI system for this level of safety criticality.
So Bluebird is trying to write that blueprint.
Essentially, yes. Developing the methodology, the tools, the whole approach needed to answer the question, how do we know this AI is safe? And according to the source, their approach to tackling this huge validation problem rests on three interconnected pillars. First, and absolutely fundamental, they recognize the need for a digital twin. This is the bedrock.
Yeah. Pillar 1, digital twin.
Second, you need to design and build a diverse range of AI agents. Test different approaches, see what works, what the challenges are.
Pillar 2, design AI agents.
And third, once you have the environment, the twin, and the agents to test in it, you have the basis to start the crucial ongoing conversation with governments, the public, regulators, about safety, trustworthiness, explainability, and ultimately acceptance of these autonomous systems.
Pillar 3, start the conversation. Makes sense. And that first pillar, the digital twin, that's an area Twin Labs knows a lot about.
Exactly. Let's dig into that first pillar, the digital twin, because the source really emphasizes how pivotal it is. For Project Bluebird, the digital twin is basically a high-fidelity simulation environment. It replicates UK airspace and how aircraft behave within it. Its main purpose, stated very clearly, is to provide a safe space, a sandbox to test experimental AI controllers. Let them manage simulated traffic without taking the completely unacceptable risk of doing it with real planes and real people.
Yeah, as the source says, testing this live would be crazy.
Absolutely. And for any tests done in this twin to give you meaningful, trustworthy evidence about how the AI would perform in the real world, the source stresses one critical thing. The simulation has to be as accurate and as close to reality as technically possible.
Fidelity is key.
Totally. If the simulated planes don't behave like real ones, if the weather isn't realistic, if the physics are off, then testing an AI in there won't reliably tell you how it will cope with the actual complexities and surprises of real airspace. The quality of the digital twin is paramount for valid testing.
So what makes it realistic enough? What goes into it?
Well, the source details a few key parts. It needs to generate realistic aircraft trajectories, how planes actually fly, turn, climb, descend under different conditions. If the AI handles simulated planes beautifully, but they're moving in ways real planes don't, the test is flawed.
Got it. Realistic movement.
Yeah. Right. It also needs accurate response to instructions. When the AI controller in the simulation tells a simulated plane to climb or change heading or alter speed, that simulated plane has to respond in a way that closely mirrors how a real pilot in a real plane would interpret and execute that instruction. That behavioral realism is essential.
Right.
Then, a key capability is being able to replay real-world scenarios. The source mentions loading up actual traffic data, maybe from a complex day last week or a tricky weather event last year, and running the AI against that exact historical situation. See how it does compare to the humans who handled it.
That's powerful. Testing against history.
Very powerful. And critically, you also need the ability to design totally new scenarios. This is where the digital twin really shines for validation. You can create hypothetical situations much harder, denser, more unusual than anything seen before, specifically engineered to push the AI, test its limits, probe its robustness in ways you could never ever do with real traffic.
This really hammers home a core principle that Twin Labs works with, doesn't it? The power and necessity of high-fidelity digital twins for developing, testing, validating complex systems. Creating these accurate virtual worlds isn't just helpful, it's basically foundational infrastructure for safely pushing the boundaries of autonomy, like with an AI controller. It allows the iterative development and rigorous testing at a scale the real world just can't handle before you'd ever consider deploying something like this.
Okay, so the digital twin provides the essential testing ground. Pillar 2 was designing the AI agents themselves, the potential autonomous controllers. What are the key things you have to think about when designing these, according to the source?
Right. When you're building an AI for something as critical and dynamic as ATC, there are several fundamental challenges the design has to tackle head-on. The first one is uncertainty. We touched on this with the safety bubbles. The AI just cannot assume it has perfect, instant, complete information.
Like we said, the real world is messy. Exactly. Real-world radar data has inaccuracies. Communications can be patchy. You might lose a data feed for a bit. You don't always know a plane's precise speed or turn rate instantly. You certainly don't know exactly how a human pilot will react or what unexpected moves they might need to make. So the AI's decision models, its predictions about the future, must incorporate and reason about these inherent uncertainties. They can't be brittle and just assume perfect data.
Needs to handle the fuzziness.
Precisely. Closely related is the problem of unexpected scenarios. A purely rules-based system, like we discussed, just falls over when it sees something outside its rulebook. A robust AI controller for ATC needs to be able to handle stuff that wasn't in its training data or design specs. The source uses this memorable, slightly quirky example. What if the AI is trained only on commercial jets and then suddenly a hot air balloon drifts into its sector?
Oh, sorry. Okay. Yeah, that would be unexpected.
Totally. If the AI has no framework for understanding or dealing with such a novel situation, it could be disastrous. The AI design needs principles of robustness, maybe graceful degradation, so it doesn't just freeze or make a dangerous move because it's encountered something utterly new.
Needs a fallback, some kind of resilience.
Exactly. Communication is also highlighted as vital and complex. It's way more than just issuing instructions. Human controllers talk constantly to each other, coordinating handoffs between sectors, discussing potential issues, maybe debating strategies with colleagues, and they have a continuous dialogue with pilots.
Right. It's a team effort, lots of talking.
This debate and exchange, this fluid back and forth, is fundamental to how humans manage complex airspace safely. Designing an AI that can effectively participate in or replicate the necessary functions of this communication loop, maybe interacting with human controllers, other AIs, or processing pilot inputs, it's a significant design challenge.
How does an AI debate? Yeah, tricky.
Yeah, very tricky. And then there's the interpretability challenge again, looping back to that trade-off. In a safety-critical domain like this, lives at stake, it is absolutely non-negotiable to be able to deeply understand why the AI made a specific decision, especially if it was a bad one or led to an incident.
Investigators would demand answers.
Regulators, the public, everyone would. So the AI's design, even if it uses complex learning methods, must include mechanisms or architectural choices that allow for some level of post-hoc interpretability or explanation. It's a fundamental design constraint driven purely by safety needs.
Got it. Performance isn't enough. You need to understand it.
Right. And finally, the regulatory landscape adds another layer. As the source notes, there isn't a specific regulatory framework yet for fully autonomous AI ATC systems. There's still research. But designing these agents means looking ahead. What kind of evidence will regulators demand? What level of transparency will the public need? Designing AI for ATC means thinking not just about technical performance, but also about building a case for trustworthiness and safety that will satisfy future rules and societal expectations.
So a lot to consider when building these agents.
Absolutely. So operating within their high-fidelity digital twin environment, Project Bluebird is developing and testing a whole suite of these AI agents. They're exploring different architectures, different levels of complexity, this parallel exploration of different AI designs within a realistic simulated environment. That's another area where the kind of expertise Twin Labs has in building and managing complex simulations is directly relevant.
Testing multiple approaches at once.
Exactly. The source material shows the spectrum they're building and assessing. At the simpler end, you've got the basic rules-based systems, mostly as a baseline comparison. At the other end, the full reinforcement learning agent. Maximum potential complexity, novel solutions, but also the maximum black box problem.
And the middle ground.
And crucially, Project Bluebird is investing heavily in those gray box systems we talked about. The middle ground on the interpretability complexity seesaw. These include things like Rails-based systems, which kind of constrain the AI to follow predefined rails or procedures based on human expertise, search-based systems, which explore lots of possible decisions to find good outcomes, and optimization methods using mathematical models to find the best solution given constraints. The source notes the technical details are complex, but the key idea is they're hybrid. They try to bake in some knowledge of air traffic control, leveraging human expertise and safety procedures, while still using AI techniques for complexity and optimization beyond simple rules.
Trying to get that balance.
Yep.
Now, the source gives this really compelling visual example of one of these gray box agents working in the twin. It shows the AI handling way more planes in a sector than a human normally would, keeping them all safely separated. But what's really fascinating, and directly addresses that interpretability problem, is a feature they specifically build into the display. The purple lines.
Ah, yes, the purple lines. Very important.
They aren't just decoration, right? They came about because when human controllers first watched early AI prototypes, they'd see the AI make a decision, maybe turn a plane slightly differently than they would have, and even if it worked out fine, their reaction was, okay, but what was its plan? Why did it do that specifically?
You needed to see the thinking behind the action.
Precisely. They needed insight into the AI's forward strategy, not just its immediate move. So the purple lines, they're the AI's attempt to show its internal plan to the human observer. They represent the AI's predicted future path for every single plane it's controlling, stretching out ahead. And the little purple dots along those lines show where the AI currently intends to give further instructions like climb here, change heading there.
Makes the plan visible.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This visual projection of the AI's multi-step plan provides a vital layer of interpretability. It helps human assessors understand the AI's reasoning and evaluate its strategy in a way that just wasn't possible with a pure black box.
And this leads us straight to maybe the biggest challenge of all. How do you rigorously assess if one of these AI agents is actually safe enough? Safe enough for real planes? The source contrasts this challenge with how we assess human controllers now. Human trainees go through tons of training, then written exams, then simulation assessments.
Right, the exams.
In the simulation part, they might handle, say, 5 or 10 specific, carefully designed traffic scenarios on a screen. A human assessor watches, scores them, and crucially, the trainee is expected to explain their reasoning. The assessor can ask, why did you turn that plane there? And the trainee talks through their thought process, showing they understand the safety principles, the procedure.
They demonstrate their competence verbally.
Right. And the assessor then extrapolates from those limited examples. Based on the demonstrated understanding and performance in those few scenarios, they're deemed competent, trustworthy for real traffic.
Okay, makes sense for humans. How is assessing AI different?
It's vastly different. And significantly harder, as the source points out. An AI controller, especially a complex one, cannot explain its reasoning like that. Not in a way that easily maps to human language and logic. You can't just sit it down and ask why.
Black box problem again.
Exactly. Because of this fundamental difference in transparency, the burden of proof is way higher for an AI system. If a human passes 5 simulation scenarios, we generally infer they have the overall competence. If an AI passes the same 5 scenarios, that doesn't give us nearly the same confidence.
Why not?
Because it could potentially just be a fluke, meaning its learned patterns just happen to work for those specific inputs, but maybe they aren't robust or generalizable to slightly different situations. Because the AI can't easily explain its underlying understanding, regulators and the public would demand a significantly higher evidence base to trust its competence compared to a human. Way more proof needed.
But they still have to pass the human test first. Right.
Absolutely. The source notes that's a crucial first step in their assessment process. The AI must still be able to pass the standard human simulation exam scenarios. That's the baseline. If it can't even handle the limited scenarios a human is tested on, well, it's clearly not ready. But passing the human exam, that's seen as necessary, but nowhere near sufficient for proving real-world safety. It's just the entry ticket.
Okay, so given all that, where does Project Bluebird stand today? The source gives an update on their current progress, what they're focusing on now.
Yeah, their current work is really centered on 2 main fronts. Firstly, they're heavily invested in validating the digital twin itself. Like we said, the accuracy and realism of that simulation, non-negotiable if the evidence generated is going to be trustworthy. They're working hard to ensure the twin faithfully replicates the complexities of real airspace and aircraft behavior.
Nailing down the accuracy of the testing.
Exactly. Secondly, a major near-term goal for the project is getting one or more of their AI agents to successfully pass those initial parts of the human controller exams, specifically the simulation bits that human trainees do. The source mentions that while they haven't quite hit this milestone yet, they are getting very, very close. The stated goal, based on the source's timing, was to have agents passing these specific human exam components by the end of this year, referring to the source's time frame.
Okay, so getting close on that first hurdle.
Right. But, and this is a critical distinction the source makes, passing the human exam is just the first hurdle. It shows the AI can handle scenarios designed for humans on a limited scale. The truly hard part of validation comes next. The major proposal outlined in the source is that after passing that human baseline, the AI safety must be demonstrated over thousands or millions of artificial scenarios created within the digital twin.
Millions. Wow.
Thousands or millions, yeah. This is where the power of the digital twin, again, aligning perfectly with Twin Labs' capabilities in complex simulation, becomes absolutely essential. You can design scenarios far harder, higher density, involving more unusual event combinations than you'd ever see in historical data, or could realistically test with humans. Running the AI through literally millions of these edge cases and stress tests is seen as the only way to build that robust statistical evidence base needed to make a compelling safety case and get that significantly higher evidence base compared to human assessment.
So if we pull all these threads together from this deep dive, the overall picture from the source seems pretty clear. AI decision makers are hugely powerful, offer incredible potential for domains like ATC by overcoming human limits in speed, consistency, data processing.
Huge potential, yes.
But they also bring their risks, especially in these high-stakes environments. The core challenge is navigating that seesaw, the trade-off between complexity needed for the real world and the interpretability needed for trust.
That's the central tension.
And proving safety for these advanced systems like autonomous ATC is very hard. It's not solved. Researchers like those on Project Bluebird are actively working it out on the fly, developing the methods as they go. Ultimately, the source concludes, the path to trusting AI in these critical settings hinges on this explainable and interpretability angle, being able to understand the AI's decisions.
Absolutely. But it's not meant to be an alarmist message. The source offers reassurance, stating, don't worry, full automation of air traffic control is still a long way away.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah, this isn't happening tomorrow.
Right.
It's a hugely complex undertaking, very much a work in progress. However, it represents very exciting research into how we can potentially augment human capabilities, collaborate with AI, and crucially, how we build the necessary frameworks, the tools, and the trust to safely integrate advanced AI into the critical systems that underpin modern society. And the development of robust digital twins, like the work Twin Labs does, is clearly a foundational element in making this research, and especially the future validation, even possible. So, to quickly recap the most important points, the key insights from this deep dive into Project Bluebird and AI in ATC. We've seen AI can potentially augment or replace human decisions due to our limitations, but our trust level depends heavily on the stakes.
Higher stakes, more trust needed.
Exactly. We explored different AI methods, rules-based versus RL, and that critical trade-off, interpretability versus complexity. With the gray box maybe being the goal for safety-critical systems, we learned ATC safety is incredibly complex. Buffer zones, multiple layers of redundancy, planning for failure, not just avoiding collisions.
Way more than just keeping planes apart.
Right. Validating AI for this is a massive challenge. Meeting a framework like Project Bluebird's key components, highly accurate digital twins where Twin Labs has expertise and rigorous agent assessment, and crucially, proving AI safety requires a significantly higher burden of proof than for humans, demanding vast simulation testing because the AI can't easily explain itself like we do.
So the lessons learned here seem pretty profound. First, understanding how an AI decides getting that interpretability is non-negotiable for trust, especially where safety is involved.
Absolutely crucial.
Second, simulation environments. Digital twins aren't just nice-to-haves, they're foundational infrastructure, essential for safely developing and validating AI in complex domains like ATC at the scale needed to convince people it's safe. You need that robust testing only a twin can provide.
Couldn't agree more. They are essential enablers.
And third, this whole journey developing trust, figuring out regulation for advanced AI, it's an ongoing, complex process. It needs researchers, industry partners like Twin Labs, regulators, and the public all talking to each other.
It's a societal conversation as much as a technical one. So, given everything we've talked about today, the deep complexity of ATC safety, the fundamental challenge of AI interpretability, the need for these robust digital twins, the sheer scale of testing involved, here's maybe a final thought for you, our listener, to mull over. What level of evidence, what specific kind of testing results, what degree of transparency into the AI's decision process would make you personally comfortable trusting an AI system with your safety in a really high-stakes scenario, whether that's flying or being in an autonomous car or maybe even medical decisions down the line? And perhaps even more fundamentally, what does trust for a non-human decision maker like an AI even mean to you on a personal level? Something to think about.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.
Thank you for joining us today. Visit the Twin Labs website for more business insights.